Good morning. I'd like to bring the April 3rd, 2019 Planning Advisory Commission to order. And we'll start by standing and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Well, good morning. First thing we'd like to do is say, please silence your cell phones, turn them off during this time. We don't want any distractions. And I remind those in the audience and those watching on television that this is the first hearing of any rezoning, text change, or special exception request brought before us today. We will first hear a reading of the staff report for the case by planning staff and ask the applicant to provide a brief overview of the request. We will then give the opportunity for anyone in the audience to speak for or against that request, to inquire about and request. Commissioners will have time for needed discussion on the case, and once a motion is made and seconded by the commission, a vote will take place and a recommendation will be rendered. The case will go back to the planning department for their independent recommendation. If a favorable recommendation is given, then the case is forwarded to the city council with the two independent recommendations. If the planning department makes a recommendation for denial, the applicant will have 10 days from the receipt of a letter stating the denial to notify the clerk of council that they are requesting to be placed on city council agenda. The City Council of Columbus will hold a public meeting, first reading. Said council shall consider the case, review PAC and planning department recommendations, and hear discussion on the matter. Council will then make a final decision at a second public meeting, which is called the second reading. All right, we have a very short agenda today. First thing on the agenda is to approve the minutes from March the 20th, 2019. And I think what we do here is, has anyone on the commission noticed anything that needs to be changed? If you would bring it up now, and so we'll consider those good. Okay. All right, thank you very much. We'll come to our first case this morning, which is a rezoning or a zoning case. REZN 03190359. This is a request to rezone 9.33 acres of land located at 6890 River Road. Current zoning is RO, residential office, with conditions. Proposed zoning is RO, residential office, with amended conditions. The proposed use is residential condominiums. George Mize is the applicant. This property is located in Council District 2, Mr. Davis. And we will hear from Mr. Renfro first on the staff report.
Yes, sir. General land use is inconsistent in planning area A. Current land use designation is rural residential. Future is mixed use. It is compatible with the existing land uses. The property does not lie within the floodway and floodplain area. The developer will need an approved drainage plan prior to issuance of a site development permit if a permit is required. Property is served by all city services. The average annual daily trips will increase by 204 trips if used for condo townhouse type use. The level of service will remain a level of service B. The site shall meet the codes and regulations of consolidated government for residential use. There be no school impact buffer requirement. The site shall include a Category C buffer along the property line bordered by the SFR2 zoning district. The three options under Category C are 20 feet with a certain amount of canopy trees, understory trees and shrubs, ornamental grasses per 100 linear feet, 10 feet with a certain amount of shrubs, ornamental grasses per 100 linear feet, and a wood fence or masonry wall, 30 feet of undisturbed natural buffer. No response from Fort Benning, no response from DRI recommendation. The surrounding zoning, north is RO residential office, south is residential office, east is single family residential 2, west is residential estate 1. 15 property owners within 300 feet of the subject property were notified of the rezoning request. The planning department received 3 phone calls regarding the rezoning. Additional information, River Road Roundabout is under construction, and as far as previously this area was slated to become an office park. That traffic report for that would have been 561 compared to the 204 trips for the condominium townhouse use. There are 16 conditions with this, and I will let the applicant speak to those when he gets up.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Renfro. Commissioners, do y'all have any questions of the planning division?
I do.
Yes, sir. Mr. Dudley?
This gets to the conditions, but it's more a question for the city.
Okay.
Conditions 12 and 13, the way they're being changed seems to make it much more difficult to eventually widen River Road. Do you know whether the city or the state have any interest in eventually widening River Road?
As of right now, there isn't any plans to widen that.
Okay, thank you.
I will mention that or address that a little bit, just to give you my thoughts about that, too.
Mr. Bollinger has a question.
Just one thing, we do need to amend the staff report because the one that we received said no calls or emails, even though below it says the opposition. Can you give us any details on the three that were in?
The three people who called were concerned about traffic and the congestion that it may cause.
Any other questions, commissioners? All right, we'll hear from the applicant. If you would state your name and address, please.
Sure. I'm George Myers. I'm with the law firm of Page Crown. I'm 111 Bay Avenue. I'm here today representing the applicant as well as the developer. The applicant and owner of the property is LRW Group. Here with me on behalf of the LRW Group is Mr. Andy Robinson. The developer is Steve Corbett, a well-known local developer, having developed over 3,000 apartment units, 2,500 single-family lots, and over 900 single-family residences. Steve kind of specializes in upscale, high-end residential developments, and Steve is with me today. Our engineers and surveyors are Moon Meeks, Mason & Vincent, certainly one of the most well-respected engineering firms in the area, and here with me on behalf of Moon Meeks is Mr. Anthony Slaughter. As John indicated, what we're seeking to do today, okay, we've got it up there. Just give you kind of an overall site plan of what we're trying. Can I get that on my screen? Oh, there you go. Okay. What we're seeking to do is rezone. We're actually change conditions on about 9.33 acres of land, which is located just south of the intersection of Mobley Road and River Road, just kind of sandwiched between Thrive at Green Island and River Place, both retirement communities. The property is currently zoned RO with conditions, and we seek to keep the property zoned RO with change conditions, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But what Steve is proposing to do is to develop 35 high-end, high-quality, single-story residential condominium units. The units will be predominantly duplexes. They'll be about 2,000 square feet apiece. They'll have double garages. They'll have porches. They'll consist primarily of brick with minor hardy plank accents. I'll give you an idea of what Steve has in mind. We've got 3 or 4 pictures of those. But you see, they're high-quality, high-end development. But we're looking for sales prices in the $260,000 to $280,000 range. But in order to do that, we're going to have to change some conditions. And I think you may have in your packet a copy of the old ordinance, 07-85, and John wanted me to go through these with you, and I'm happy to do it. This is the ordinance that changed this property from SFR1 to RO and then imposed 16 different conditions. And what I'm going to do, if it's okay, is I'll just go through and mention those conditions that we seek to delete or those conditions we seek to modify, because all of the other conditions are going to stay the same, okay? Conditions 1, 2, and 3 deal with building size, building height, building number. We're going to have to seek to delete all 3 of those conditions, and in lieu of that, we're going to put something like limited to 35 single-story residential condominium units. Condition number 7, dealing with building materials, needs to be modified to add that we're going to be able to put hardy plank on the property not to exceed more than 20% of the total exterior coverage. Item 10 deals with garbage pickup. Well, that item really doesn't apply now because this property is going to be serviced by garbage trucks as any other residential subdivision in the city. Getting to the question of number 12, we propose that be deleted. Number 12 is the one that says that the developer is to reserve property for the widening of right-of-way of River Road. A couple of thoughts about that. It doesn't say how much. I question whether or not that's even an enforceable sort of a condition, but really practically it's not necessary. You got, at that point of River Road, you've got 130-foot wide River Road, and you've got pavement that averages about 30 feet. So there's plenty of room there for widening, and as John indicated, there's been no indication that River Road is going to be widened there or not. So I don't think that condition as stated even needs to be there. Condition number 13, we want to modify a portion of this condition, and the portion we need to modify is the portion that says no building or whatever can be built within 120 feet of River Road as it currently exists. I interpret that to mean edge of pavement, okay? And what we're seeking to do is to change that to say 35 feet of the right-of-way. And let me give you an apples and apples comparison. If you go edge to pavement and you're 35 feet of the right-of-way, you're 102 feet from the edge of the pavement. So we're essentially requesting a reduction of about 18 feet. And to also give you some comparison, our neighbor to the south, River Place, its closest building to the edge of the pavement is 94 feet. So we'll be further away from River Road than our neighbor to the south. And of course, number 16 is the one that requires it to be an office park. That needs to be deleted so that we can do the residential condominium development. We believe the proposed residential development is consistent and compatible with surrounding land uses. As you guys know, except for that northwest quadrant and the intersection of River Road and Mountain Brook, pretty much all of the current use out there is residential. As far as buffering goes, of course, as John mentioned, we'll have to buffer in accordance with the UDO. In addition to that, the current zoning ordinance requires two additional buffering conditions, both of which will remain. Condition number 4 requires a 10-foot densely planted evergreen buffer along the north line. That will stay. It also, item number 5, requires a 30-foot buffer along the River Road right-of-way. That too will stay, and it'll be planted with plant material of various heights. Both of those two buffering conditions will remain. We anticipated some questions on traffic. As John indicated, that's what most of the people talked about. But also, as he indicated, that shouldn't be a concern. We got Moon Meeks to look into it, and it's consistent with what the city found, and that is that the traffic count will actually decrease with the residential development as opposed to the office park. This is particularly true. It's not going to be a problem because our target market is going to be seniors and retirees. As John indicated, all public facilities and infrastructure are located at the site. There'll be no negative impact to those facilities and infrastructure. The city's not going to have to make an additional investment in that regard. The development is going to provide substantial economic benefits to the city and its citizens, including a creation of numerous construction jobs during the build-out process, together with an increase in business for local contractors, suppliers, electricians, plumbers, and others that support the construction industry. We're also going to have a substantial increase in the tax base for ad valorem tax purposes, thus providing an economic return to the city, again, without requiring any additional investment on the city's part. In particular, we anticipate increasing ad valorem taxes from about $9,700 a year to over $145,000 a year. In addition, the city is going to recognize a boom in the form of sales tax receipts from the sale and purchase of millions of dollars of construction materials. We believe our application and request meet all the requirements for rezoning. We believe that the oral classification, as changed, is consistent and compatible with the surrounding land uses. Again, all public facilities and infrastructure are in place. There'll be no negative impact to those facilities and infrastructure, and believe this development will provide a substantial benefit to the community in terms of job creation and tax revenue generation. Therefore, we respectfully request you approve our application and you recommend approval to council. We're happy to try and answer any questions you might have.
All right, Commissioners, do you have any? Mr. Dudley?
I do, and this may be for the city or for you. On condition 13, the proposal that we have says, in part, and no structure shall be constructed within 35 feet of the eastern edge of River Road, as said road presently exists. And from what you say, it sounds like you want that to read within 35 feet of the eastern edge of the right-of-way.
Correct.
Of River Road.
Yes.
Okay, so is that exact language acceptable?
It is, and that can be updated.
Okay.
Good, thank you.
Sorry for that confusion.
All right, we have another question, Mr. Brown. Did he answer? Okay. Mr. Bollinger?
In condition number 3, I'm curious why that's being deleted, if all of these are going to be single-story buildings.
Well, I guess just reading it, they're really, other than the fact that it applies to the office park, it could stay.
Okay. I was just curious if
I mean,
there
it's
was a
fine
reason.
if y'all want to keep that in. It just says, buildings shall be no more than 2 stories in heights. Building which front River Road, which I don't know that they're really any going to be fronting River Road.
Right.
Shall be 1 story in height, and any other building shall either be 1 story or 2 stories. We could certainly leave that, but the reason I deleted it is because it was relating to the buildings in the office park itself.
Okay. I was just curious why, because it did meet the conditions of what you're building.
Right.
Thank you.
All right.
But
Commissioner?
I will say, I think, because what I've told the residents, I would rather delete it because there's not going to be any 2-story buildings, just 1 story. And we've told the residents there's going to be 1 story. So if we could delete that, and I may be speaking against my client here a bit, but we did tell everybody that it'd be single-story residential development.
And I guess if we were going to, if you're trying to meet that condition rather than deleting it, you would just say no more than 1 story.
Correct.
Period.
That's right. And that's what we proposed to replace it with.
Well, no, it was actually proposed to be deleted, so.
Well, but we're going to replace it with no more than 35 single-story residential condominium units.
I understand.
Okay.
Okay.
Along those lines, are you having a management building or an office building? Would that count as one of the residential condominium units, or?
It's my understanding they're going to be individually owned, so there would not be a management building. Is that correct? There's no office. Yeah, they're just going to be individually owned,
Thank you.
like downsizing kind of homes.
Right. Okay. Any other questions, gentlemen? Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Mize.
Thank you.
All right. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak for this case? I think we've already heard that, and by the looks of it, there's probably no one here that wants to speak against it. So, Commissioners, I'd like to open the floor up for a motion. All right, Mr. Greenblatt.
Yes, regarding case REZN-03-19-0359, applicant George Mize, owner LRW Group LLC at 6890 River Road, approximately 9.33 acres. Current zoning is RO with conditions. The proposed zoning is RO with amended conditions. I move that we approve based on the fact that it is compatible with existing land uses.
Okay.
Question.
We have a motion.
Does this include the update to change the language about the eastern edge of the road as opposed to the right-of-way?
Yes, as discussed.
As discussed, okay. Do we have a second? Second, Mr. Bollinger. Oh, all right. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your right hand. All right, it's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, that completes our cases for today. In new business, it appears we don't have another meeting in April, so we'll be back here on May the 1st, 2019. Any other things we need to discuss this morning, Mr. Renfro?
No, sir.
Can I ask
Yes, sir.
John a question?
Go ahead.
What's the disposition on the text amendment right now for Uptown, or Historic District?
It's slated to go on April 23rd to council. The planning department's still working to make sure everything's right before we send that staff report over to council.
Thank you.
So if that's approved by council on the would that be approved on the 23rd? When would it come
No,
back to
it would
you?
have to go for a second reading as well.
Second read.
Okay.
So the special exception wouldn't be back to us until sometime in probably the end of May.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you for keeping us updated on that. Any other questions? Any other needs? Well, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.